This is 5 on 20 News, where the news is distressing and the newscasters are in dire need of a pick-me-up, with Zeina Peterson
and Joel Foster. It's Friday, April 7th, and we're coming to you live from the Creative Tucson studio in downtown Tucson.
First, let's talk local headlines.
Yesterday, state Republicans rushed through a bill that expands the state's school voucher program, which allows students to use taxpayer money for private school. The Empowerment Scholarship Account program was sent to the governor's desk, where he's expected to sign it with glee. The passed law ended up being less expensive than the original bill, which was supposed to have allowed 1.1 million students to use the vouchers by 2021. Rather, the passed legislation allows an additional 5,500 students to sign up for the program, but caps the number at 30,000 by 2022. Democrats claim that the law is another attempt to dismantle the public school system in the state, which is already struggling without the added help. This is because the vouchers are used for private and religious schools and often redirect students out of the public system. Supporters of the voucher program claim that they enable school choice and that students shouldn't be forced to attend failing schools. But critics say that the voucher programs take away any incentive to fix up the failing schools in the first place and contribute to the decreasing standards of American public education. Senator Bob Worsley, a Republican of Mesa who instituted the new voucher limits, said he could go either way on the voucher issue, but he says he wanted to find a, quote, pragmatic solution between the two warring factions in the state. He called the amendment a, quote, happy medium, and said that it challenges private schools to step up and show that they can provide results. Democrat Steve Farley thinks that the law will benefit mostly wealthy families who will use the vouchers to subsidize the cost of private school. An Arizona Republican analysis found that students from more wealthy areas largely use the program and abandon their high-performing public school districts. Farley said that voucher programs like these are looking at, quote, transfer from the have-nots to the haves, and said that we should not be experimenting in our children. Although, to be fair, Arizona's school system has been experimenting for years by seeing how low a salary teachers would take before they stopped wanting to teach.
Protesters left inflatable ducks outside the office of Arizona Senator Jeff Flake yesterday to protest the confirmation of Supreme Court nominee Neil Gorsuch. They accused the senator of ducking questions during the confirmation hearings by not seeming to take the event seriously. One of Flake's questions went viral when he asked Gorsuch who he thought would win a fight between one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses. Flake also asked Gorsuch where he liked to go on vacation, which was supposedly suggested by the senator's family, in case you're wondering. Flake later said he would choose the duck. Protesters said that Gorsuch also ducked the serious questions during the hearings. Protest organizer Rod McLeod said that Gorsuch didn't talk about what he wants to accomplish from the bench or how he would approach the judicial philosophy. This morning, the Senate approved Gorsuch's confirmation after deliberating for 2 hours. Yesterday, the Senate voted to use the nuclear option, which allowed a confirmation with only 51 votes, as opposed to the customary 60 votes. The nuclear option essentially means that the senators will no longer be able to use the filibuster to delay a proposed law or confirmation. They will, however, be able to release a giant mutant duck to the chambers in order to delay a vote.
Well, that's good. At least it left that. Experts say that the southern part of Arizona is at an above-average risk for forest fires in the month of May. About 310,000 acres were burned last year in Arizona, still less than 2011, one of the worst years on record, where more than 1 million acres burned. Carrie Templin of the Tonto National Forest Service says that by June and July, the southern two-thirds of the state will experience higher than usual risk for fire damage. She urges people who own homes or have businesses in fire-prone areas to take precautions. Templin said that when the air dries out, then a buffer is formed that keeps the fire running, especially if it's a windy day. She advised that homeowners clear out brush and weeds 30 feet around the home and make sure that trees aren't touching the roof. Finally, she said to avoid coating your house with kerosene, no matter how nice and shiny it might make your house look.
Yesterday, the state Supreme Court struck down a law that made medical marijuana illegal on college campuses. The Supreme Court ruled that the law was unconstitutional and violated the Arizona Medical Marijuana Act. While it won't be a crime to possess medical marijuana on campus, the court still gives universities to ban the substance on their campuses. At the same time, the court threw out the case after Andre Maestas, who was charged under the court former law in 2015 with felony cannabis possession. The court said that the Voter Protection Act of 1998 made the campus marijuana law illegal. The VPA requires that 3/4 of a majority of the legislature in order to change a voter-approved law. Since the medical marijuana law was made through a voter initiative, they needed 3/4. However, the governor, Jan Brewer, signed the college campus ban in 2012 without the legislative approval. The court also reversed a law passed by the legislature that banned payments for getting signatures for Citizens Initiative. Critics said that the law would have made it more difficult to get a referendum on the ballot because signature gatherers are commonly paid. However, the legislature is still considering 2 other anti-initiative laws, so they're not done yet trying to prevent weed from being illegal. The Arizona Attorney General Office has not yet announced if they'll pursue an appeal, but they have 30 days to make the decision. Attorney General Mark Brnovich said he would think it over if he smoked a few blunts and discussed it with his peoples.
See how it goes. The University of Arizona's Board of Regents approved a tuition hike that includes a new fee for the school's athletics programs. Yesterday, the board voted to increase tuition by 1%, which would bring the yearly total to $12,228 for undergraduates and $35,658 for those from out of state. The tuition increases only apply to new students, so those 93% of students already locked into their tuition amount will have no effect. Along with the raise in tuition, a host of fees were also added to the bill. These include $55 for information technology in school libraries to be used for wireless internet upgrades, digital tools, and software for students. There's also a $125 fee for health and recreation to expand health services and recreational center facilities and programming. Then there's a $70 increase to student services and a $190 increase to student housing. And finally, a $100 fee to support student athletics programs. Oh, and of course, there's another $90 fee to incoming President Robert Robbins to provide him with a new welcome Porsche. We reported yesterday about how Robbins will arrive as the highest paid college president in the state's history and will receive almost $1 million per year. So when you're late to your 3rd job and you've defaulted on your student loans, remember that those tuition increases weren't in vain.
Right. Former Maricopa County Sheriff and diversity advocate Joe Arpaio is firing back after the closure of his beloved tent cities. Arpaio held a press conference on Tuesday where he argued against the recent decision by current Sheriff Paul Penzoni to close the tent cities, which housed prisoners. He claimed that the tent cities saved the county money because building new jails will cost, quote, millions of dollars to handle all the people who will be coming into jail systems. However, a committee ordered by Penzoni to study the tent cities found that closing them would save the county $4.5 million per year. Penzoni said that the, quote, circus ends and the tents come down. The tent cities were criticized for housing prisoners in tents that got up to 145 degrees in the summer and which had malfunctioning fans. One prisoner sued the state and won $948,000 when he suffered brain damage after being dragged out of a bed by a group of hooded inmates. Arpaio spent most of his press conference fighting back at the circus line, as if he hadn't already wasted reporters' time. He called the comments, quote, an insult to circus workers. To be exact, he said, it's not a circus, it's not a circus. That's insulting to circus people. It's disgusting calling it a circus. Maybe everything I do is a circus, but let's not insult the circus. Soon after the conference, Arpaio announced that he plans to join the circus next month and will reform his famous pink underwear posse, who will eat the heads of chickens for quarters.
All right, and I wanted to take a moment to talk to you about the program you're watching right now. Here at 5120, we're undertaking a new kind of citizen journalism. We're going to give you the news as we see it, and we want more people to speak up with us. We need writers, hosts, anchors, camera people, sound people, the whole gamut. The times require a new way of informing ourselves. So join us. Do it. Do it now. Email us at info@creativetucson.org to get involved. And if you think there's a story we're missing, a person we should interview, an upcoming event we should cover, or have any news tips for us, please shoot us an email at info@creativetucson.org. We're here for you, and we want to cover all stories from all points of view, so please don't be strangers. Now in national and international news.
As you might have heard, the U.S. launched airstrikes in Syria in response to the chemical attacks that killed over 80 civilians on Tuesday. Pentagon officials said that 59 Tomahawk missiles were fired at the El Sharat airfield in Syria. The strikes were aimed at fighter jets, Raider fuel pumps, and equipment and were conducted at night when the base would be less populated. However, CNN reported that people were at the base, including Russians. In a statement announcing the attacks, the president claimed the airfield was where the chemical weapons originated from. However, it was later revealed that there was no evidence that the chemicals were housed in the facility. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad ordered the strikes on Tuesday, which were revealed to use sarin gas, a banned chemical agent. Turkish officials discovered the sarin by performing autopsies on some of the victims of the attack. Once again, Trump tried to tie his decision to the Obama administration, which he had said had been unresponsive to past sarin attacks. Trump didn't spoil the chance to get a dig in when he said that he was prompted by the, quote, the failures of previous efforts by the world community to respond effectively to the Syrian civil war. Even minutes after declaring war on another nation, he goes for the burn. I guess that's why he was elected. U.S. officials said that Russians were notified about the strikes beforehand, a claim that was disputed by the Russian media. But before we get worked up and start constructing bomb shelters, it's helpful to remember that the U.S. has launched more than 14,000 airstrikes in Syria since 2014. But it's also helpful to remember that none of these strikes have been directed toward Assad, which is certain to ratchet up tensions. This is especially true when you consider that Russia has gotten quite cozy with Assad and has been one single nation helping him stay in power. This one should be interesting. I guess we could call this the climax. And like every other Trump climax, it ended with regret, disgust, and the concern that we might catch something.
Yeah. A legal defense set up for undocumented immigrants in Los Angeles has turned into a more complicated matter than city officials expected. The debate over the LA Justice Fund involves whether to use the money to defend all immigrants or only those that don't have criminal charges. LA Mayor Eric Garcetti announced the fund last December before the Trump administration began their immigration crackdown. On March 30th, city officials met for the second time to figure out how they would disperse the funds. At the meeting, the issue was raised whether money should be used for those immigrants who have violent criminal histories or not. Immigrant rights groups think that the fund should be universal and feel that everyone is entitled to due process. However, city officials fear that using money to defend criminals could lessen support for the plan. On March 29th, the members of the California Senate amended Senate Bill 6, which set up the LA Justice Fund. They changed the drafting of the law to exclude those with violent felony convictions on their record to access the fund. The LA version of the bill now goes even further by excluding those who were convicted for human trafficking, domestic abuse, and pimping. But at the city council meeting, participants overwhelmingly voiced their support that anyone facing deportation should be able to access the fund. Lindsay Tozaklowski of the Immigrant Defenders Law Center told the committee that, quote, no one is beyond redemption. She said that by sorting undocumented immigrants according to who can and who can't access the fund, it risks adopting Trump's bad hombre worldview where there are good immigrants and bad immigrants, which she disagrees with. Activists say that under Trump's enforcement, those with criminal records are most in need of lawyers and that they deserve due process just like anyone else. They claim that many of these individuals were pressured to admit to crimes that they didn't commit and could be deported because they don't have a proper defense. But at the end of the meeting, the committee voted to keep those exemptions that ban those with criminal records from accessing the fund. Whereas before the bill was known as Due Process for All Act, it's now known as the Expanding Due Process Act. If the bill continues to be watered down, it will soon be known as the Due Process for Everyone Except Criminals, some non-criminals, people who talk during movies, people with brown eyes, people with widow's peaks, and people who criticize the Due Process for All Act and the Expanding Due Process Act, or the DPFEECSNOCPWTD-MPBYPWPPWCDAAEDPA for short. Woo!
Right, mouthful. So Twitter is suing the U.S. government for what they say is an attempt to unmask an anonymous anti-Trump account. The social media company received a summons from ICE and U.S. Customs and Border Protection that demanded the identity of the individuals behind the immigration account, which purports to be representing rogue members of the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services Agency. Twitter is now asking a federal court to declare that the summons is unlawful and unenforceable because it violates the First Amendment right of both Twitter and its users. The ACLU is also defending the identity of the account and will also file a separate court order to have the summons discarded. It's unknown as to whether these rogue accounts are actually run by government staff or if it's just someone impersonating them. Regardless, Aisha Bhandari of the ACLU says that the government has no reason to be seeking this information. Senator Ron Wyden spoke out against the summons, saying that the Department of Homeland Security is wasting taxpayer resources to uncover an anonymous critic on Twitter. He called it, quote, witch hunt, and commended Twitter for standing up to what he called government overreach. Liberation members of the Republican Party were noticeably absent in the discussion, although they're usually quick to point out government overreach, at least when it serves their interests. The final tweet for the out-immigration was posted yesterday around 9 a.m. and was a simple message that stated, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof." The Trump administration released a statement claiming that the account took the words from an artist's text and is proof that they should be shut down.
All right, 2 GOP lawmakers introduced a law that would remove restrictions against offshore accounts established under the Obama administration. Rep. Mark Meadows and Senator Rand Paul's bill would undo rules under the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, or FATCA. The rule requires financial institutions to report information about overseas accounts held by U.S. citizens to the IRS. The point of the rule was to fight offshore tax evasion, but the GOP lawmakers said that it violates citizens' rights to privacy. Meadows, a member of the Freedom Caucus, also claims that the law has led to a flood of people renouncing their U.S. citizenship. FATCA has been a target of anti-tax advocates who are hoping the Trump administration would get rid of the law as part of their tax overhaul that's supposed to be released later this year. Meadows and Paul introduced similar legislation during the last Congress and last week sent a letter to Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin urging the administration to commit to repealing the law. Meadows also said that FATCA prevents foreign investment and prevents Americans from accessing the financial system while overseas. When asked to explain why this is, Meadows said, "Just trust me, it does." Then hopped onto the first plane to the Cayman Islands.
A mother of 4 children from Ohio was targeted for a deportation despite having no criminal record, the first instance of such a deportation order since the Trump administration immigration crackdown. Melba Trujillo was told that her deportation is set for next Tuesday, when she'll have to choose to either let her 4 children stay behind or come to Mexico with her. None of her children have ever been outside the country, and she has lived in the U.S. for the past 15 years. While a recent report showed that deportations have not increased under Trump, this instance shows that the administration is more willing to deport those with no criminal record, which would be a new policy. Under the Obama administration, deportations were common, but they were all confined on those who were convicted of crimes besides immigration-related laws. Trujillo said that she doesn't understand the reason to separate her family and that she's only working to support her family. Trump said on the campaign trail that he would remove 11 million undocumented immigrants in the country, but would mainly focus on the most serious criminals, or the bad hombres, as he so eloquently put it. Immigration lawyers have noticed that there has been a shift in immigration enforcement to arrest those who have previously been considered a low priority for deportation. When one lawyer asked an immigration officer about the change, he replied, "I don't know if you're aware, but we have a new president. Things are different now." You said it, buddy. Trujillo was arrested outside her home on Wednesday and told that her deportation is imminent. Her lawyer, Kathleen Kirsch, says that her client does not present a threat to public safety and has lived peacefully in the country since 2002 with no criminal record. She said that this is not making America safer, but it's leaving 4 kids without their mom. An IC representative said that Trujillo's case had been reviewed several times and she was found to have, quote, "no legal basis for remaining in the U.S." Trujillo is the main breadwinner in her family due to her husband's health problems and also takes care of 2 kids who have special medical needs. One child has a form of pre-diabetes and the other has a history of seizures. She comes from Michoacan in Mexico, which has been overrun by violence and drug gangs. Because of this, Trujillo said she can't picture bringing her kids into such an environment. She applied for refugee status years ago, but hasn't received an update on whether she'll get approved. The Trump administration reportedly plans to approve the day after she leaves, then promptly lose the application in comical wind gusts that sends the paper over the big, beautiful wall.
A coalition of 17 states is challenging the Trump administration over recent changes to climate change policy. New York is leading the group, who filed a legal challenge over Trump's decision to roll back the regulations, including the Clean Power Plan, which seeks to reduce emissions. Trump signed an executive order last month to overturn the rules, claiming that they hinder U.S. energy production and jobs without providing meaningful benefits. Guess breathing clean air isn't a meaningful benefit. The Clean Power Plan was opposed by 26 Republican-led states, so the rule was never implemented as it's hung up in an appeals court. The New York-led suit asked the court to throw out the EPA's request to delay the rule, saying that it, quote, wastes substantial resources already expended in this legislation. The coalition includes attorneys general from California, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Illinois, Iowa, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Minnesota, New Mexico, Oregon, Rhode Island, Vermont, Virginia, Washington, and D.C. These are also the places where you won't need a face mask to breathe in 30 years.
administration pick for FDA chief faced scrutiny over possible conflicts of interest for his ties to the industry that he's expected to oversee. Democrats on the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee questioned Scott Gottlieb on whether he would be able to separate himself from the interests of over 24 drug and medical device companies in which he has investments. The FDA is responsible for regulating manufacturers of prescription drugs, including opiate painkillers. This could be a problem because Gottlieb has revealed that he received almost $45,000 in speaking fees from drug firms that manufacture and distribute opiates. Mallinckrodt Pharmaceuticals paid Gottlieb $22,500 for a speech last November, shortly after the November election. Mallinckrodt was charged with supplying as many as 500 million suspicions order of opiates in Florida between 2008 and 2012. This week, the company settled the suit for $35 million without having to admit wrongdoing. The Healthcare Distributors Alliance also maintained Gottlieb as a speaker last September. 3 of the companies involved in the alliance were accused of providing opiates to so-called pill mills, or doctors who hand out opiates with little questioning. After the DEA went after those companies, Gottlieb condemned the move, claiming that the DEA overstepped its bounds and should lose its authority to police that opiate market. Senators Ed Markey and Sherrod Brown have already voiced their opposition to Gottlieb's nomination because of his industry ties. At the hearing, Democratic Senator Chris Murphy questioned Gottlieb's support for policy accountable board that would decide which drugs would get approved. Murphy called this a quote, huge gift to drug industry, which would put a group of friendlies on a commission that decides approval. Republicans defend Gottlieb, claiming that his industry experience made him perfectly suited for this position. Because of his connections, Gottlieb promised last month that he would recuse himself for 1 year from the FDA matters involving the companies that he invested in, but he refused Senator Patty Murray's suggestion that he recuse himself for 2 years. Senator Bernie Sanders was perhaps the hardest on Gottlieb as he questioned Trump's motives for the nomination. He said that while Trump has said that he supports being able to buy drugs from other countries, Gottlieb has written op-eds where he opposed the practice. The one positive note from Gottlieb came when he was asked about the connection between vaccines and autism. When Trump has supported in the past, Gottlieb said that the connection has been exhaustively studied and there's no need to investigate the matter further. But Gottlieb responded to answer when he was asked about the scientific connection between making money and approving dangerous drugs. This was Zeina Peterson.
And Joel Foster for 5 on 20 News.
Next up, Joel starts out the recent media tornado for us. Thanks, y'all.